She fooled billionaires, scientists, and some of the most powerful people in the world. All with something that didn't work. And the craziest part? Nobody questioned it. Because on the surface, everything looked perfect. The company was called Theranos, and it promised something revolutionary. A single drop of blood could run hundreds of tests, faster, cheaper, more accessible than anything that existed. No needles, no vials, just a tiny finger prick and a machine that could change medicine forever. At least, that's what people were told. Behind it all was a young founder named Elizabeth Holmes. She dropped out of Stanford at just 19 and told the world she was going to reinvent healthcare, and people believed her. Not just anyone, some of the most powerful investors on the planet. Billionaires, former government officials, military leaders. Even Henry Kissinger sat on her board. That alone made it feel real. Because when enough powerful people believe something, it stops feeling like a question and starts feeling like a fact. The media called her the next Steve Jobs. Black turtleneck, deep voice, same visionary image. The company's valuation? $9 billion. And she owned most of it. On paper, she was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the world. But there was one small problem. Nobody had actually seen the technology work. Not independently, not under real scrutiny. Everything was happening behind closed doors. Employees weren't allowed to talk to each other. Teams were separated. Information was locked down. Even inside the company, people didn't fully understand how the technology worked. But no one pushed too hard, because everything else looked too good. Big partnerships, major headlines, massive funding, and a story everyone wanted to believe. But then, someone inside the company started to notice something.
The results weren't just inaccurate, they were dangerous.
But inside the company, things were starting to feel off. Not publicly, not in the headlines, but behind the scenes, something wasn't adding up. One of the people who noticed was a young employee. He wasn't just anyone. His grandfather was one of the most respected figures in American politics, and also a board member at Theranos, which made what Tyler was seeing even harder to ignore. At first, it was small things, test results that didn't match, machines that kept failing, data that had to be adjusted over and over again. And then, something worse. Instead of fixing the technology, they started working around it, using traditional machines to secretly run the tests, while telling the world it was all being done by their own invention. Which meant one thing: the breakthrough didn't exist. But it got worse, because these weren't just numbers on a screen. They were real medical results for real patients. People were being told they had conditions they didn't have, and others were being told they were fine when they weren't. This wasn't just a flawed product anymore. It was dangerous. And Tyler knew it, but speaking up wasn't simple. Because inside Theranos, questioning anything came with consequences. Employees who raised concerns were shut down or removed completely. And the company had something else that kept people quiet. Lawyers. Powerful ones. Legal threats. Confidentiality agreements. Pressure from every direction. Even his own family was connected to the company. Which meant if he spoke out, he wasn't just risking his job. He was risking everything. So for a while, he stayed quiet, watching, listening, trying to understand how deep it went. But eventually, he realized something. If no one said anything, people could get hurt. And that's when he made a decision: to expose everything. Exposing something like this wasn't as simple as telling the truth. Because the bigger the lie, the harder it is for people to believe it. So Tyler didn't go public right away. Instead, the story slowly made its way to someone who could actually investigate it. He worked at the in-text and specialized in uncovering corporate secrets. At first, even he wasn't sure what to believe. Because on the outside, Theranos looked unstoppable. Big partnerships, massive valuation, endorsements from powerful people. But the more he looked, the more things didn't add up. Sources started talking, former employees quietly confirming the same story. The machines didn't work, and the company knew it. But proving it was dangerous. Because as soon as Theranos found out, they didn't stay quiet. They fought back. Hard. Legal threats, private investigators, pressure on anyone speaking out, even trying to stop the story before it was published. Calls were made. Warnings were sent. Back off. But Carreyrou didn't stop. He kept digging, kept verifying, kept pushing forward, until finally, he had enough. And in 2015, the story went public. The headline exposed everything. The technology didn't work, the tests were unreliable, and the company had been misleading investors, patients, and the public. At first, people didn't know what to think. Some believed it, others didn't. Because it's hard to accept that something this big could all be a lie. But then more reports came out, more evidence, more whistleblowers. And slowly, the story started to shift from breakthrough to scandal. And once that shift happened, there was no going back. Once the story was out, the damage started spreading. At first, slowly, then all at once. Regulators began to step in. The Content Reference Index equals 0 launched an investigation, inspecting the labs, reviewing the data, and what they found was worse than expected. Serious inaccuracies, faulty processes, unreliable results. Thousands of test results had to be voided. Patients who trusted those results were left questioning everything. Then came the restrictions. Theranos was banned from operating its labs. Its core business shut down. Investors started pulling back, partnerships collapsed, and the valuation that once stood at $9 billion began to disappear. Within months, everything started falling apart. Offices closing, layoffs happening, operations shrinking. The image, the story, the illusion, all of it breaking. At the center of it all was Elizabeth Holmes. For years, she had controlled the narrative. Now, she was losing it. Interviews became tense, questions harder to answer. The same confidence started to crack. But even then, she didn't admit it. She defended the company, denied the accusations, said the technology worked. Despite everything, she held the line. But the pressure kept building. More investigations, more evidence, more people speaking out, until eventually, there was nothing left to protect. The company that once promised to change the world was collapsing in real time. And the question now wasn't whether it would survive. It was how far it would fall. By this point, there was nothing left to hide. The company was collapsing, the story was public, and the spotlight was now fully on Elizabeth Holmes. In 2018, the US government stepped in. Elizabeth Holmes was charged with multiple counts of fraud, accused of misleading investors, patients, and the public. The same person who once stood on stages talking about changing the world was now facing the possibility of prison. The trial took years. Arguments, testimonies, evidence laid out piece by piece. And at the center of it all, one question. Did she know? Was this a mistake? A failure? Or something intentional? Because believing your idea will work is one thing. Telling the world it already does when it doesn't is something else entirely. In 2022, the verdict came in. Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud. The company was gone. Its valuation from billions to zero. But here's the part that makes this story different. It wasn't just one person. It was investors who didn't ask enough questions. It was media that pushed the story without digging deeper. It was a system that rewarded vision even when there was no proof. Because the idea was powerful. A future where healthcare is faster, cheaper, more accessible. People didn't just believe the company, they believed the possibility. And that belief made it easier to ignore the warning signs. Because sometimes the biggest lies aren't the ones that sound impossible. They're the ones we want to believe.